Welcome to the Alt Cryptocast, your altcoin headquarters. Today we've got a new episode and a very special one as we have a guest with us. And the guest is nonetheless Charles Hoskinson. My name is Jules Vullings. We've got Fritz with us again.
Hey guys.
And we're gonna be diving straight into it. Charles, welcome. Good to have you here. Could you give us a quick introduction on who you are and how you got into the crypto space?
Well, very brief. I've been in crypto for a long time, about a decade and a half. Started as a speculator and a miner, like most people did, back in the early days of Bitcoin talk. I came in through the Slashdot revolution. So there was a post on Slashdot. It had a link to Satoshi's white paper. I read it. I was kind of a political firebrand back then, and I was part of the Ron Paul campaign. So I was reading about Austrian economics and sound money and deflationary monies and full reserve banks and these types of things. And I was very disgruntled because those were kind of around the time of Occupy Wall Street in the United States. And so it was very, very long time ago. And we were all still a little disgruntled about the 2008 banking crisis, and nobody went to jail. You know, Obama got elected and he said he was going to throw all the bankers in jail. And instead he put the bankers in charge with Timothy Geithner and these other guys. So Bitcoin made sense. And we said, oh, that looks great. It wasn't worth anything at the time and nobody really cared about it at the time. It went up all the way to $30 and then it collapsed to $4. And then everybody's, oh, Bitcoin's dead. You know, I was like, all right, well, yeah, I still like it. And we didn't take it very seriously. And then over time, I said, I want to bring more people into Bitcoin. So I created the Bitcoin Education Project. And then I ended up creating a class called Bitcoin, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love Crypto. And I gave it away for free. And I ended up getting over 70,000 students. And that's how I met everybody, like Roger Ver and Andreas Antonopoulos and Eric Voorhees and Charlie Shrem, and eventually what became the Bitcoin Foundation. I was the founding chair of the education committee for the Bitcoin Foundation. So at some point, you got to do something. So one of my students actually said, hey, I'll give you some money to start a company. I said, all right. So I ended up starting a company with Dan Larimer, of all people, called the company's called Invictus Innovations, and our first product was called BitShares, which was my first altcoin, and it was actually the first algorithmic stablecoin and the first DEX. It was back in 2013, so it was way ahead of its time, and it brought a lot of cool ideas to the cryptocurrency space, like delegated proof of stake and having blockchain building kits. We called it graphene. So later on, people created Cosmos and Parity Substrate and these types of things, but it was just too far ahead of its time. And then, of course, most people know me because I was briefly connected to Ethereum. I was one of the original people there, and they went in a slightly different direction. But my primary vocation has been for the past 10 years running input-output, and we're most known for being the builders of Cardano, and now most recently Midnight. And that's been a lot of fun. So I've been basically here since the beginning, and we've published over 250 papers. We run the largest research group in the world for cryptocurrencies. And it's been fun to kind of watch all the different generations, first, second, and third, now fourth, kind of evolve and grow, and watch crypto grow from nothing to 500 million people and trillions of dollars of value. It's been a wild ride.
Yeah. So a long time, I guess. You are one of the real OGs, as some would call it. Thanks a lot for the introduction. Now, obviously, we did some research into what you did and what you've been busy with the last let's say 10 years as well. So we got a couple quick questions on who you actually are personally before we move on to Midnight as well, which has been your latest endeavor. So what I noticed after looking up sort of what you did on Google was that you live on a bison farm. Is that correct?
Yeah, I got 22,000 acres. For you Europeans, it's about 100 square kilometers.
Wow.
And so it's quite a big ranch. And I have several hundred bison, the buffalo, the American bison. And I've been raising them for years, and they run around, and you feed them and try not to get killed. It's a lot of fun.
What makes you got intrigued by bisons?
They were on the land when I bought it, so I just said, I'm just a bison rancher now.
Cool.
Sometimes
they calm you at some
sometimes
point?
you don't need like deep existential or philosophical reasons. You just like, I guess that's what I do now. I'm a bison guy.
Do you spend a lot of time with them or around them or looking
Oh
at them?
yeah. I try to spend the weekends up at the ranch. I live in Colorado and Wyoming. So Colorado Monday through Friday, and then I try to spend the weekends up in Wyoming. It's a few-hour drive. In fact, it's
Ah,
just about to go to ranch tonight. But the ranch
nice.
is a second home, and it's a very relaxing place. There's only 3,000 people that live nearby.
Wow.
So there's almost no one there. And if you don't want to see your neighbors, you don't see your neighbors. So it's a good place to go to relax and recharge.
Nice. I mean, yeah, it's you don't hear it every day. Let's be honest. When someone has, especially that many. So what I always wonder, Charles, is for a person like you, could you describe how would a regular day for you look like? And what I mean with that is what I always find interesting, especially people in crypto. For example, when I wake up, I check the Bitcoin prices. I see what has been happening on social media and stuff like that. What does a day in the life of you look like? What do you do in the first thing in the morning when you wake up, for example?
Well, I have a lot of channels that aggregate messages. So when I wake up, I check all those different channels. There's WhatsApp groups and Telegram groups, and obviously there's personal stuff. And so it takes about 10-15 minutes just to go through the backlog of all the messages. Then I check the markets, mostly because the markets are an information system, and they let me know, is this going to be a good day or a bad day? If the markets are in deep red or deep green, something's going on. And I say, all right, well, I got to check and see what's going on. If they're stagnant or, they're trading flat, that's just an average day. After that, then, you go into the work specific things. And so I take a look at what's in Slack, and, I take a look at what's in Discord. And then you check calendar and you say, all right, what's, set for the calendar. So it's a pretty ritualized existence. But I got 6 companies, so you have to be meticulously organized to be able to run all those different things, and you have to kind of plan out, okay, what's the highest priority for the day, and do I need to change any of those priorities based upon what happened the night before? The thing is, we're global, and so while I'm sleeping, people are working in Europe or Japan. You see, and so no matter what, things are going 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, including development. Um, if it's an off day, I try not to check the phone, and I just try to work on projects. I have a big backlog of projects, philosophical projects and pedagogical projects, and development projects that I do. And my GitHub repo is pretty much saturated with them these days. I try to use GitHub as a storage mechanism alongside Obsidian as like a second brain, and I'm always thinking into it and trying to plan out various things. And then usually there's a lot of events, like I'm giving a keynote at a university for a mathematics department tomorrow, so I got to prepare for that, and so there's always the monster of the week that you have to go and slay.
Have you been actively busy with AI as well lately? Just a side note.
Oh yeah, extensively. Um, and I use all the different models. I use
Yeah,
Codex and use Claude Code and Gemini,
yeah,
a little bit of Grok, and also some open source models. And I even tune my own. For example, I've been modifying Gemma 4 to see if I can translate the Quen Gödel prover to work with Gemma 4, but it's just taking time to train. I even built my own variant of OpenClaw. I called it Logan the Exit Liquidity Lobster, and it's a little repo that's in my GitHub called Dances with Claws. I absolutely do use AI, especially these days with lots of tools and an agentic workflow and a lot of great skills. What I've noticed is I spend more time building Claude skills than I do prompting. Andrew Karpathy's LLM wiki is a really, really powerful tool, but it needs to be combined with kind of like the superpower skill and a Git work tree style workflow. And then, of course, you still need an agent harness for these types of things. So I spent quite a bit of time reading about AI these days because it's so powerful and it gives you the ability to do a lot of stuff.
D- Does it already also improve your execution? And do you also notice in your companies that it goes faster now?
Yeah, but you have to be careful because AI, it gets you about 80% of the way. It can think for you, but it can't understand for you. And it doesn't know when it's made a mistake. So you need to have a very, very strong error correction system And that's okay. There's plenty of ways to build it, but you can't take it at face value. So it gives you a lot of ideas, it gives you a lot of checklists. But if you just take raw AI, the tells are obvious. The M dash is another pattern I like to call slop fall, where it's just headers and bullet points. And it's very obvious when people are just blindly using AI and they have no idea what they're talking about. But if you use it as an appropriate tool, it's extremely powerful. And we've been using it extensively in the development of Nightstream, which is a post-quantum folding system. I've been using it a lot for mathematical formalizations. So, for example, I've been able to get it to work really well with Lean 4. And what I've been experimenting is something called IMO for formalization. So you have an intent driven. So you have a prose specification of software. Then you do model checking using TLA plus, and then you have a specification oracle written in Lean. Normally, when you do this type of work, it's very slow and methodical, and it takes like months to years to be able to produce even a basic, high quality artifact for some software repo. But with AI, you can produce it rather quickly, and it's mostly right because the machine is able to check its own proofs, and either they compile or not. And it's very easy to see if it's trivial or it's actually solving something meaningful. So I've noticed a vast improvement in our ability to do those types of things, and these new models like Opus 4.6, they're right on the frontier. And within, I'd say, about 12, 24 months, their self-correction capabilities will be sufficiently good that they're not going to make things up anymore. And then that's going to be the big inflection point where you start seeing 10xers or 100xers in productivity.
Yeah, yeah. Hey, and going back towards blockchain and crypto, because obviously that's what we're here for mainly. If you weren't building blockchain technology, what do you think you would be doing these days, apart from the Bisons, obviously?
Well, I already did it. I do a lot of work in synthetic biology as well. So I have a company that genetically engineers plants, and we've been able to do a lot of really cool and interesting things with them, from making them glow to accelerated growth and things like that. I also have a healthcare clinic. We have 20,000 patients, and I run that with my dad and brother. They're doctors. And we do a lot of regenerative medicine work there. So we've been doing a lot of research with adipose-derived mesenchymal stem cells, actually working on a book about stem cells, and so I'll publish that at some point.
Wow.
And there we extract them, we culture expand them, and we just actually worked with the state of Wyoming and passed a law called the Stem Cell Freedom Act. So we're going to start integrating them into our clinical practice. And right now we're very focused on kind of two big families of disease conditions. So one are degenerative, osteodegenerative disorders, so like arthritis and joint damage and these things, because everybody has those pains after 50. And then the other side is we're interested in pulmonary conditions. So things in your lungs, like pulmonary fibrosis or emphysema or COPD. We think that stem cells combined with hyperbarics would massively, massively improve that state of affairs. So we're going to begin treatments probably towards the second half of this year. But I spent quite a bit of time there, and
Wow.
I do everything. Like I have a patent that we're getting on a device that extracts stem cells, and it's this little disc. You put it on, as titanium teeth, and it has chemokines, and they suck the stem cells out. So you don't have to do liposuction to get adipose-derived cells. All the way up to modifying the cells and thinking, do we do a iPSC, or do we do a transient expression of RNA? So a lot of biology, in addition to cryptocurrencies. I was cross-trained earlier in life. I wanted to be a doctor, but I decided to go into mathematics. But I took a lot of chemistry, biochemistry, and biology classes. So it was fun going back into it because like, oh yeah, I remember all that. And now with AI, it's like really easy to really remember all of that and get the state of the art very quickly. AI is actually better for biology, I would say, than for computer science. And it's really good for computer science.
Yeah.
Oh, amazing. Do you also apply health ideas to your own life, like experiment on yourself, or is it mainly in clinical context?
Oh, I try. Yeah, I'm in poor health, and I need to spend some time there. The problem is I'm running midnight, and did all this Cardano stuff and everything. The stress is unbelievably high, and there's just a lot going on, and it's a brutal thing because you get horrifically criticized, and you have to just
Yeah.
keep pushing
Yeah.
through. So you don't sleep well, you don't eat right, you get fat, and then people attack
Yeah.
you. They say, "Oh, he's fat and he's old," and it just gets so absurd. So the thing about health is all of modern medicine, last 100 years of modern medicine, doesn't hold a candle to the big four for lifestyle medicine. Yeah, sleep, diet, exercise, and mental health. If you don't have those
Yeah.
things, you
Yeah.
will die young, and you will get chronic ailments. So you got to fix those things, and no stem cells or peptides or exosomes or other things are going to meaningfully move the needle if you have bad sleep and bad eating habits and you don't exercise. So you have to take care of the lifestyle side first. The challenge is life gets in the way of lifestyle. People work the night, and people don't sleep right, and people don't eat right, and they travel. The big issue with me is I traveled too much. Last year I traveled 250 days, and I went to 11 countries. And so I'm always going and always going, and when you're always going, unfortunately, you don't sleep right, you don't eat right, and it's catastrophic on your health.
Yeah, and then like you said, you have a lot going on. Looking ahead towards midnight, obviously, that's I think fair to say your latest endeavor and also a very big one. We've actually met a part of the team as well in Singapore back with Token 2049 last year. So perhaps for the listeners as well, could you give an explanation or an introduction on what actually Midnight is and why did you start Midnight? What's the idea behind Midnight and what's the target behind it?
Well, Midnight is a very practical project. It didn't come out of the ether being like, hey, we want to do something experimental and cool. It's like, actually, we wanted to solve real problems. So I've been in the industry for about a decade and a half, and I see the same thing happen every year. Big Fortune 500 company, XYZ, will announce that they're going to do a cryptocurrency pilot with some blockchain. It could be Ethereum or Solana or Bitcoin or whatever. Everybody gets very excited. They all go to Reddit. They all go to Twitter. They say, oh, yes, we're doing this pilot. It's going to be a great pilot. And think about all the adoption. Mercedes-Benz is issuing a bond, or Microsoft is doing this, or this guy's doing that. And you notice, you're like, okay, 2 years later, like whatever happened to that? Is is Mercedes running on the blockchain now? Is like everything on Ethereum? And they just go silent. So I looked into it years ago, and I said, well, why do you guys not fully embrace blockchain? We have all this stuff. Why don't you, move your entire business on it? And it's one of three things. Either it's too hard for the users, the compliance department or the legal team, they just can't get there, so the rule setting is not where it needs to be. But the real big one is privacy. And they say, okay, well, every business has a public side and a private side. So public is your brand and your reputation and your website, and private, your HR data and how much you pay people and all these other things. They say, well, the problem is blockchains, they only do the public side. Everything is remembered forever. It's transparent, can't roll it back, and all your competitors get to see it. So that's not really compatible with a modern business. So they struggle because when they try to do the private stuff, they have to go off chain, and it centralizes the whole solution. And they say, okay, what's the point of adopting a blockchain then? Because it's like centralized. So this doesn't make sense. So I said it'd be really cool to build a system where at its core, abstraction, smart compliance, and privacy were like the three things it's trying to solve. Abstraction, so account abstraction and chain abstraction, it works for every blockchain, not just one. So it's not its own layer one, but rather it wants to work with everything. And account abstraction, meaning the user doesn't care about the keys or any of these other things. They just say what they want, and then it works on a cell phone, and it's very simple and easy to use. And then when you look at smart compliance, then you can actually embed into the system the ability to put rules into each transaction, each application that can be very well followed. And then privacy, meaning that all the data that goes in, you have strict rules about how disclosure works, and you can selectively disclose what you want to do, how you want to do it. And the other derivation of that, the corollary that you can derive from it, is also the unification of off-chain and on-chain. So you have all these people that want to provide services, but you don't really trust them, and nor should you. But they have all this power. They have these giant servers, and they have 24/7 availability, and they're cheap to use. So how do you bring Microsoft in and Amazon in and Google in, and with their $1 trillion of hardware that they have? to the space and let them be a force for good instead of, a centralizer. Well, you need to encrypt things. You need to use zero knowledge cryptography. You need to use trusted execution environments. And so what Midnight effectively does is provides a stack of tools as a system for Ethereum, Solana, Cardano, Bitcoin, and other blockchains to allow them to build hybrid applications. And they can then start looking at abstraction, compliance, and privacy as a set of capabilities. And they can add it in, and then this gives you that last mile, gives you the ability to do real world assets like tokenized real estate or stocks because they have a compliance component. It gives you the ability to put a full DAO on a blockchain and actually do your payroll and your HR and other things in a blockchain environment, but not reveal personal information. And that's a big market. There's 11,000 DAOs that were issued last year. It allows you also to do medical records, supply chains, all the things we've been talking about for a really long time that we think are great use cases in the cryptocurrency space. And it lets you pay in any currency you want. It lets you pay in Ether, it lets you pay in Sol, it lets you pay in stable coins, because we have this nice, beautiful dual tokenomics model. And the Dust side has a capacity exchange, and that's what's on the Midnight Ledger. And basically, it's predictable pricing, and you just swap your asset that you want to pay the fee in for the Dust. The Dust pays the transaction. So we launched it in kind of like an anti-VC way. We did an airdrop to 8 different ecosystems, 7 blockchains. 33.6 million people were eligible. We launched back last year in December. About 1 million redeemed, and now we just launched the network literally 3 weeks ago. And it's in a guarded mode, and we co-launched it with a lot of partners and collaborators like MoneyGram and Vodafone and Google Cloud and Telegram and so forth. And it's been just great to work with all of them. So all these wonderful features are turning on, and we're also testing experimental new features like post-quantum capabilities for lattice-based folding, and we're getting it to work well with all the GPUs that they use for AI, so you can use these big data centers. But at its core, it's about abstraction, compliance, and privacy, and it's about giving it to everyone everywhere. And I think it's the last mile for blockchain. And my belief is this will make all those pilots successful,
Yeah.
and we'll see large enterprises finally be able to move into the blockchain space.
Yeah, that would be really a next step, and also in adoption. What have the reactions been so far from these corporations with Midnight?
Overwhelmingly positive. Like, we got Monument Bank is going to do tokenized deposits on the chain, and as I mentioned, there's very large companies working with us like Google Cloud and others. That's not a small company. And it really, Midnight is looking like it's going to be the home for Web 2.5. So when you look at the most valuable companies in the cryptocurrency space, they're not Web 3 companies, they're Web 2.5 companies. So they have one foot in a regulated activity like Binance, for example, but then they have one foot in the Web 3 world like Binance Smart Chain. And when you put them together, there's 400 million people, and CZ is now richer than Bill Gates. Or you look at Tether, and Tether is 1 foot in a regulated business vehicle, but then there's also the Tether asset that trades on chain, and Tether makes more money than Goldman Sachs. So these companies can be quite valuable, and every Web 2 company wants to be a Web 2.5 company because they need compliance, privacy, and they need an easy onboarding path for their users. So they need some concept of abstraction. And generally, they don't want to pick and choose winners and losers. They just want to work with everybody because that's where all the liquidity comes from and asset flows come from. So, the problem is a lot of these Web 2.5 companies, they end up having to build their own blockchains because Ethereum really doesn't do it for them, and Solana really doesn't do it for them. So you look at Canton, you look at like Arc, these types of things that come, and basically their purpose is to facilitate the needs of the Web 2.5 enterprise. We say, well, that's kind of silly. Web 2.5 companies aren't blockchain builders, and they're going to make a lot of mistakes, and also it's not really going to work well for them. So why don't we go ahead and build a chain that's like the Ethereum of Web 2.5? It's open and not closed. I thought we had this fight with Hyperledger Fabric and R3 Corda and versus Ethereum and other things, and the open networks won. So let's build open networks, and let's make them work everywhere for everyone and make them ridiculously easy, and just keep adding more capabilities like multi-party computation and confidential compute, eventually homomorphic encryption. on top of the zero knowledge capabilities and more abstraction capabilities. So the open wallet standard and other things. The other happy accident, and we didn't expect this while we were working on it, but we realized that Midnight is the single best place for agents to live. And what we're thinking
Oh,
is
really?
the vast majority of cryptocurrency transactions and DeFi use by 2030 is probably going to be done by bots, not humans. Because the thing is, crypto's hard and you have to understand a lot. You have to know a lot of specific things. And human beings, some are very good at this, but the vast majority, they screw up somewhere along the way and they lose their money and bad things happen. So what's going to happen is people are going to start delegating to agents to do DeFi on their behalf, or delegating the agents to do transactions on their behalf, just like they're doing commerce and search with this. And so there's a lot of great standards, like Coinbase and Google created X.402 for a payment standard for agents. And now you're seeing like the open wallet standard come out for agentic wallets. And so we say, well, the language of agents is proofs. Agents can't speak English to each other. They speak proofs to each other. So I say, I'm Charles. Okay, prove it to me. Well, so Midnight is a giant proof machine, and it's a giant multi-chain proof machine. So it's the best place for agents to live because you can set clear rules about what they can and can't do for delegated authority. They have a proof engine to prove properties to each other, and your data gets kept private. You have to give agents lots of data for them to be useful, but you have no rules behind what happens with that data. And if it goes to a cloud provider or something, they have it forever and they can use it against you. So that's not really good. So having a system that sorts out the privacy there is really cool. And so we actually created a program called Midnight City. It's like an agentic civilization. So if you go to midnight.city, you can kind of see it. And actually at the end of this month, you'll be able to buy your own agents and put them inside the game world. And it's almost like a Tamagotchi pet. They just kind of go around, you feed them, you do things with them. But over time, we're going to add agentic capabilities to actually interface with the blockchain. So they'll have their own wallets. You can give them value, and then they can participate in DeFi.
And I think you said a couple weeks ago you launched, if I'm correctly, March 17th. So at what point, because obviously you've been building on this for a long time, where, the vision you set out a couple years ago even, has there been a point where you said, okay, wow, this is exactly what I meant when I thought of Midnight and how I thought it was going to be? Has there been a snap moment already for you?
Well, we're almost there. I mean, there's a lot more work to do. And launching a cryptocurrency, I've done it now 3 times. This is the 4th time. So I've started. I think I'm masochistic. It's not. Parents, don't let your kids launch blockchains. It's a hard thing, and so it's been the smoothest launch we've ever done. But in the lead up to March 17th, we had probably 40 plus days of 7 days a week, 12 to 16-hour days to get her launched. And it's a guarded launch, and we're gradually turning on capabilities. You turn on the basement, and then the first floor, and then the second floor. So it's never done. But what's really cool is we've had a lot of wow moments along the way. The idea of having programmable privacy is super cool. Normally, zero knowledge systems are fixed function. So you send a transaction and it's private, but that's it. Having private smart contracts with a smart contract programming language, like in our case, Compact, which is a variant of TypeScript, the most common language in the world, is magical, because then you can start building things. And really, a lot of fun has come from the hackathons and the partners. We have 65,000 people in our Discord, and we're kind of building up our ambassador army right now. My hope is to get about 1,000 by June, which is awesome. And we have every 2 weeks, 4 weeks demos of people building things and doing things. We have over 100 different dApps that are being built right now. And you get to see and some of it's just, it surprises you. Like, for example, we have one I saw the other day. A guy's a pilot and he's trying to put all the flight logs on a blockchain, but you need privacy with those flight logs. So no one ever put this on a blockchain before. And it kind of makes sense why you want to do it, because these are legal artifacts and they have a lot of liability, insurance, and other things connected to them. So these are documents that really should be in a blockchain context, but at the same time, they have to have some sort of privacy schema on them. So he's building a system for it. And it's just something, as a non-pilot, I just never think about. But then when you think about it, you say, well, that's self-evident. Yeah, we really need a system like this. And we have another partner, Nexifuse. They're building an agentic electronic medical record system. And again, you require privacy at the core. And it makes sense why you need a blockchain, because you have access control. Like, You want to make sure only your doctor gets to see the records, and you have portability. You need to move records from a clinic to a hospital to country. So you need kind of a control plan, but there's economic agency in these records too. Like, how do I extract out of medical records suitability for clinical trials or public health information or these types of things? So that's a perfect use case of a technology like Midnight, and it's the gift that keeps on giving. And so it's cool to watch people actually build it in real time, because they give you design requirements and you kind of learn, like, how do I make the system useful and scalable? But at the same time, you can, if they succeed, solving those problems makes people's lives immeasurably better. They make them safer, simpler, and ultimately they make sure that everybody has to follow the same set of rules and trust is not violated.
If you look at your all the launches, what are the main areas you learned from your previous launches, which you now implemented and used with Midnight?
Well, the first and foremost, you have to launch with partners as opposed to launch solo. And so exchange partners like Midnight, for example, it has the most liquidity I've ever had for a new project. We launched with Binance Spot, and all these other things. And, at the all-time high of trading, $9 billion in a single day, which is on par with what you'd see from Tether or Circle or Ethereum. So it's very rare to see a new project have that kind of liquidity. So, good partners help you achieve liquidity and notoriety. The FNOs, we have 11 major companies running full nodes, from Google to Telegram to others. So great relationships there. Also, another really important thing is start with the utility and then work your way to decentralization. I did it the other way around with Cardano. I started with decentralization, then we started building out the utility in Cardano. And it made, like, oh, well, we need to be decentralized. Well, okay, yeah. And no one cares in practice. And that's why people like Solana or others were able to outpace Cardano, because we were so focused on philosophy and principles that they were very pragmatic. In cryptocurrencies, you have purism, pragmatism, and you have aspiration. And so in purism is like Satoshi's vision, super decentralized, never upgrade anything, just leave it as it is. And a pragmatism is like, okay, it's okay to be federated for a while. It's okay to do this. And aspirations, like, we want to do this, but we don't know how to do it. Every cryptocurrency is some form of blend of all three of those. And if you over index on one, you end up painting yourself into a corner, and then it's very hard to resolve a problem. Like, Bitcoin is a great example of being too pure. And as a result, they're now in a very serious problem. They actually have a dilemma that there's really no good resolution for. So either when quantum computers come, they functionally do nothing to resolve it, i.e. they can add a post-quantum signature, but there's no forced migration. So roughly 34% of all the Bitcoin is vulnerable today. So 1/3 of the Bitcoin supply can basically be stolen. Or you could create a forced migration mechanism, but then there's two issues here. One, there's no way to create a universal migration system for recovery. And so about 1.7 million Bitcoin will be unspendable. And the other issue is you'd have to do a hard fork to fully implement the mechanism, BIP 361. So either you abandon the cult of Satoshi and your principles and all these other things, and basically accept that about 10% of the supply will be burned, or you do nothing and accept that about 1/3 of the supply is probably going to get stolen by malicious actors within 5 to 10 years. Now, we wrote a paper about Bitcoin and quantum computers back in 2019, and we actually showed what they could do and where Bitcoin's secure and where it's not. So they had over 7 years, since we wrote that paper, and everybody's known about it for a long time. And what they could have done is built an on-chain governance system, and they could use it to make these big decisions, because, like, who's qualified to make the decision of, like, taking 8% of the supply or 10% of the supply? No one's qualified for that. And Blockstream doesn't get to decide that. So what's going to end up happening is it's likely that BlackRock and these big mining cabals and the big brands behind Bitcoin will force Bitcoin to hard fork, in my view, because they don't want to lose money. I mean, like, how can you be a holder and have 1/3 of the coin stolen and sold, by North Korea or somebody else renting a quantum computer from China? That's not a good situation. So if you're BlackRock, you're going to say, well, fix the problem with the forced migration. They say, well, Satoshi's coins will be burned. I don't care. Well, that's good for us, you know. It means those coins won't enter circulation. We're investors. But then you've just violated the principle of sound money that big companies can bully Bitcoin into changing and hard forking and stealing coins from people. Not good. But the point is that when you have those three things, if you build it right, you have the ability to navigate problems like that and survive and thrive and maintain what makes your ecosystem special. With Cardano, as much as it's maligned by people, it has an on-chain governance system. It's fully decentralized. There's a whole bunch of opinions. If we had a problem like that, we could easily resolve it. 6 months of debate, we'd move with one voice, one vision, one roadmap, because we'd vote on it. And then and we also have an on-chain treasury system, so it's actually straightforward for us to do an upgrade system. If coins aren't upgraded in a period of time, they'll just be swept into the treasury. You see, and an on-chain voting system, you can get legitimacy behind that, legal agency behind that. We have an on-chain constitution for these types of things. So everybody understands what they're getting themselves into. With Bitcoin, you don't have any of that infrastructure, so there's no real good way to make that decision other than whoever has the most economic and political influence, basically forcing it on everybody else. So you actually have no democratic process to protect. So that was a valuable lesson from Cardano. The challenge is, how do you build an efficient government? So what we're trying to do with Midnight is be more agile in the construction of governance tools, because Cardano's government takes time by design. Like 6 months to a year for a budget closure. Hard forks, we can only really do about 2 per year for the system. We can do protocol changes, parameter changes, but we're probably no more than 4 to 8 per year. So it's a slow, methodical system, and that works well for stable things. But new projects need to make decisions rather quickly, because they're new and lots of things are coming in. So you need a fundamentally different governance system for the project at that phase. So there's been a lot of learning over the last 15 years, watching where Bitcoin succeeded and failed, where Ethereum succeeded and failed. Maintaining a roadmap, building up proof of stake, doing foundational research, but then also figuring out how to launch cryptocurrencies the right way. What's really cool is Midnight's only been around for 3 months. It's extremely valuable. It's got lots of holders. It's growing exponentially, and the mainnet's running. And it's every 3 months we're trying to do a major upgrade, and every two to 4 weeks we have demos of capabilities. And in the second half of the year, we're going to see huge improvements in usability for the system. As a ZK programmable system, no one's ever done that before. It's very, very new. So we're taking it careful. We don't want a major hack or a major bug to kill the network. So we're being very systematic in, how we turn on the system. But I'd say, the second half of the year is going to be pretty remarkable in terms of use cases and applications.
Yeah. Hey, and especially also looking ahead, Charles, is apart from everything that you already mentioned, is if you had to choose one or perhaps two, the biggest challenges in the coming 12 months that you're trying to fix, or the team is trying to solve, what do you think that will be for Midnight?
Well, one of the things I would love to see is Midnight's ability to facilitate DeFi cross-chain. So
Yeah.
private Bitcoin DeFi and getting Bitcoins to participate in yield products of other chains like Solana, Ethereum, and Cardano. It's a big thing for me. Because if you think about that circuit, you have Bitcoin, you want to lock it on Bitcoin using Taproot, you want to lend it to get a stable coin because you don't want to sell your Bitcoin, and then you want to deploy that stable coin in a private way to some form of smart contract on Ethereum or Cardano or Solana to generate a yield. Then you want to convert that yield back to Bitcoin, because remember the 3 rules of Bitcoin. Rule number 1, there's only Bitcoin and there's nothing else. Everything's a shit coin. So you want to be able to convert that into Bitcoin, and so you get passive yield with your Bitcoin. A lot of complexity there, but we actually already designing that entire flow. We have a product called Pogan, which has a beautiful Bitcoin DeFi bridge that relies on the security of Taproot alone, and it's able to lend to a stable coin. We have several stablecoin partners that can be the pair there, and then we have products like RealFi that can provide the yield. So putting it all together and doing that privately, and making it very simple for the user, just click a button to start getting yield. That's the kind of stuff that's magical, because you can do dozens of DeFi transactions under the hood, but from the user's perspective, it's almost like staking, where they just click a button, they get a yield. Well, that market alone is $1.5 trillion. If you want to look at the size of Bitcoin, so it's a huge market. So I want to solve that, and I want to solve DEXs and prediction markets and other things in a private sense, and build a midnight DeFi kernel. And it's not about moving the liquidity to midnight. It's about using midnight as a meta chain to facilitate the things that are happening on Ethereum and Solana and other places, and add a privacy layer to it for these types of things, or a compliance layer to it for these types of things. So here's an example of a out there use case, but it makes so much sense when you think about it. So if you read the quantum computer paper that Google wrote with some of the guys from Stanford, when they were talking about the risk of quantum computers on Ethereum and Bitcoin and these other things, there's a very special thing. I think it's in section 2.2 of the paper, and that was a zero knowledge disclosure system. So they designed a quantum circuit, and that circuit, if you had a quantum computer, could be used to exploit things, but they didn't in the paper show you the circuit because they didn't want to show people an attack vector. So what did they do? They used a zero knowledge proof to prove that they had the circuit, and you can verify that, but they didn't show you what the design was. And so if you think about it, you say, holy moly, you could create a marketplace for zero knowledge exploits where people can prove they have an exploit. And if you have regulated commerce, the only people who can buy are the companies themselves. So if you're Microsoft and you have software and you can verify, and then you can see a list of 200-300 verified zero knowledge exploits on Windows, and then you can bid on them, you can have some sort of negotiation and actually trade, do swaps for these types of things. So you could create a white hat marketplace to price an exploits in systems. We've never had anything like that. And that's exclusively a midnight capability when you think about it, because it requires the ability to identify companies like Microsoft and Google. And by the way, it has to be private because you don't want publicly people to see these things. And for the people who have the exploits, if they reveal the exploit, well, they've already lost their instrument of value. So they have to prove that they have the exploit, but not show it until the swap is done. So that's a zero knowledge proof capability. So these are the types of things that get me excited, because marketplaces like that have never existed before. And right now, it's like bug bounties. Okay, so I'm sitting on like a Windows 11 zero knowledge exploit that can create $1 billion of damage, and Microsoft's going to give me $5,000 fixed price to go and reveal that to them. Or I can go to the dark web and sell it for $10 million. I'm sorry, this makes no sense. So why don't we let a marketplace form, and then the white hat marketplace can have comparable pricing for the economic damage? That is an example of an emergent marketplace that only Midnight can do. And there's thousands of permutations to these types of things. Another thing I'd love to see is Tinder or Tinder-like application come to Midnight. And because that's another example of selective disclosure, verified credentials. Like you say, I'm a doctor. Well, how do you really know that? It's like, I make $200,000 a year. How do you really know that? I'm 6 feet tall, or whatever the European equivalent is in centimeters.
Verify,
Women love 6 feet tall. It's their thing. It's like, if you're under 6 feet, like, screw you. So how do you verify that? And how do you actually have safe conversations? And maybe you want to send pictures to each other. Well, how do you do that in a way where they can be forgotten? And there's strong guarantees about that, so you don't get exploited. Okay, well, it seems trivial, but this is the lived experience of tens of millions of young people every single day. And they're not thinking about cryptocurrencies. They're not waking up and saying, boy, I need Ethereum, I need Solana. They don't give a shit about cryptocurrencies. So if you want cryptocurrencies to be real, you need use cases where it's a means to an end, but not an end unto itself. It's not a speculative thing, just buy a token and get rich. The token facilitates and enables something you couldn't do before. And that thing you couldn't do before makes your life better, safer, faster, easier, more profitable.
Yeah. Hey, and Charles, to almost wrap this one up, if we have a listener right now who is curious about Midnight and has been listening to all the stuff that we've been saying, if there's one thing that you say, okay, you need to take this away from this conversation, especially about Midnight, what would that be for you?
I think the single most important thing is understand that the problem that Midnight is trying to solve is a universal one that is absolutely necessary in a global society. we really want to create self-sovereignty, and you have to have sovereignty over your identity, your data, your money. So cryptocurrencies, they created self-sovereignty over money. Bitcoin, self-custody, be your own wallet, control your own money. You are master of your own domain. And then you have DID solutions, self-sovereign identity, control your identity. And you have all these data solutions. The problem is there's no unifying function for all of these things. And what we want to create with Midnight is that unifying function. And then say the safest, easiest, and simplest way to use Bitcoin is through Midnight, or to use Ethereum is through Midnight, and you get your self-sovereignty back. And don't believe for a moment that that's not unachievable and that's not necessary. The reality is that if you give it away, it seldom comes back, and you're going to regret it every single day. We saw this during COVID when, people who had a voice, they got it taken from them when they got deplatformed. They said things governments didn't like, and then suddenly the social media platforms, would basically shut their accounts down. And there was no judge, jury there. They just woke up one day and their entire voice was taken from them. When you look at China, social credit is being connected to the digital yuan over time. What that means is if you say the wrong things, your money just gets turned off. That's a lived reality for 1.4 billion people. The European Union wants to do this as well. They'll do it in a different way, but it's very clear when you read what they're doing with digital identity and what they want to do with CBDCs, where they want to go. And before Trump got elected in the United States, this is what the Biden administration was trying to do: ban normal crypto and embrace CBDCs. So by default, if we do nothing, we'll live in a world where your money and your voice are connected together. And if you use it the way that people don't like it, your economic agency gets turned off. The only way to solve that problem is to embrace self-sovereignty. And how you do that is using technologies like Midnight paired with things like Bitcoin and Cardano and Ethereum. Okay. And these systems working together, you get the full stack, and you're in the driver's seat about what you disclose and how you disclose it. And you ultimately control your own money in the easiest possible way. So if they can only take one thing, I think that's the single most important thing. And, even if you disagree with Midnight being the approach, at least philosophically get there that the self-sovereignty component is important. And that's why I'm still in the field after, a decade and a half, because the job's not done. And I'm very worried that we're going to inadvertently hand all the things that make this special for convenience purposes to large companies, and then they're just going to pull up the ladder, and we can no longer get self-sovereignty. Self-custody will be banned.
Yeah, this is going to be the title. This is not the end. All right, looking at the time as well, then I think this one is about to wrap up. Charles, a very big thank you for being here, obviously. We're going to leave all the information for all the listeners in the description of this video about Midnight, where to check it out. And if you want to have some more research into it, we'll leave it in the description as well. Appreciate you, Charles, for all the stuff that you've been doing, obviously, and also, spending the time with us here. And hope to catch you somewhere next year or so to see how Midnight is doing, and then see if you can do another one with an update.
Yep, absolutely. Thanks, guys. And make sure to go to midnight.network or midnight.city and join the Discord and just play around. We're looking for builders. We have hackathons every 2 weeks. We're always doing interesting, fun things, and it's a great, vibrant community. And what's nice about it is it's the most diverse community in all of crypto, because of the way we distributed it. Tokens went to 7 different blockchains, 8 ecosystems, from XRP to Avalanche to Bitcoin to Ethereum to Cardano, Solana. Strange bedfellows. Normally, these chains don't all get along with each other, but we have a very diverse community, and we'd love people to come join and check it out.
Nice. Amazing. For sure. The Midnight.city, we're going to check it out, the Tamagotchi type of thing that you said.
Yeah.
We'll leave a link in the description as well.
I will create agents for you guys if you want. So at the end of the month, just let us know, and we'd be happy to create some agents for you.
Nice. Yeah. Let's do it.
Great stuff.
Lovely. Charles, thanks. Everyone, thanks for watching. If you're new here, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. And hope to see you guys in the next episode. And Charles, good luck, obviously, with Midnight. And we'll speak each other at an event or some point later on during the crypto space.